Hey everyone, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with a end of the year video. I'm going to be talking about some of the most surprising and some of the most disappointing books that I ended up reading in 2020. These are not all the highest or the lowest rated books. These are ones that I just was either expecting a lot from and didn't get, or wasn't really expecting much from and got a lot. I guess I'm going to start out with the ones that I ended up being a little bit disappointed in, or a lot disappointed in, depending on the book. So that way I guess I can talk about the good ones and like end on a better note. The first one I'm going to talk about, and one of the very first books I read in 2020, was The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. Kiersten White wrote one of my favorite series, the Conqueror's Saga, and the main character in that was a woman, Vlad the Impaler. So she was a very strong character, and she was very focused and knew what she wanted. And I read that, I finished that series up, and then I was very excited to read what was lauded as like a feminist retelling of the Guinevere story. A story focusing more on Guinevere instead of Arthur in like Arthurian folklore, I guess. The legend of Arthur. So I was expecting, I guess, a character like the character in the series that I loved, and instead I kind of got this willowy, weepy, fragile seeming Guinevere. And I don't really like Guinevere as a character in most books that are retellings of the legend of King Arthur. And so like I was expecting more from this, obviously, and I didn't get it. This is the beginning of a series, and I really wish that I had liked it more, but I didn't, and I won't be continuing on with the series. This cover is so beautiful, and I'm bummed that I just didn't like it at all. Next on my disappointments list is The Traveling Vampire Show by Richard Layman. I made 2020 the year that I would pick up Layman, and I did, and I did not like it at all. This book was a like coming of age story set in the summer, things that I normally would love so much, kind of like a found family group of friends, and they are trying to get their way, they're trying to make their way into a show that's adults only. You had to be 18 to get in, and they're not quite there yet. They're about 15, 16 years old. The show says that they have a real life vampire, which is obviously like why this group of kids want to go. And the main character, his name is Dwight in this book, and he is a teenage boy, and basically the only thing that this kid talks about in the whole book is like his friend's boobs, his sister-in-law's boobs, everybody's fucking boobs. It's just all about boobs. And it was insufferable. And they don't even get to the vampire show until like 300 pages into the book, if not more. I should have marked it, but I think it was about 300 pages. And so like a lot of this was just these kids tooting around, and it wasn't very interesting. I wasn't impressed with all the boobs. Like, I get it. Boobs are cool. I know, you know, a lot of teenage boys really love boobs. But it felt immature in a way that like wasn't endearing or interesting in any way. So this next one I have not talked about on my channel yet, because it is a book, well, I guess I kind of did, but I haven't talked about it since I read it. And that is Cold Cuts by Robert Payne Cabine. I read this month. I was so psyched for this. This is a book where there are a group of scientists. They're in Antarctica, they're studying some stuff, and they get attacked by these like mutant penguins. And I know on my channel when I was talking about this just this month, I kept being like, why are there penguins? There aren't penguins in Antarctica. And and I looked it up, and there are actually penguins on the coast of Antarctica. Where they don't live is the North Pole. They do live near the South Pole. So I was being a total idiot. I was like, why are there even penguins here? Like, being a smartass about it. Anyway, there are mutant penguins. They attack these guys. Their science lab is like blown up, and so they're stuck like in this bunker in Antarctica. They're not able to get a hold of their team. So like, the setup for this is so good. Like, mutant penguins, there's obviously like, maybe they've made a discovery that other science teams don't want them to know about, and like that's why their base was exploded. But it just goes so off the rails. There were so many times where the author asked the reader to suspend disbelief, and it made it so that like, what happened here could not have physically been possible for these characters. And it got really outrageous and goofy. There is like a super long weird sex scene that kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's very weird. And this ended up just being a huge disappointment because I felt like it had so many themes that I really love in horror and would like to see more of, and then it just wasn't good. The last one, I don't have a physical copy that I can find in my house. I know I have one in my house, I just can't find it. That is Wonderland by Zoje Stage. This was a new release this year that I was so excited for. This is about a family, and they are moving from New York City to a more rural area in, I believe it's New York still. Hi ho. And it's like a mother, a father, and their two children who are like 7 and 4 or 5 or something like that. Not very old children. And they get there, and the weather starts doing weird things, and the whole time you're not really sure because we're following from the perspective of the mother who has really lived in the city her whole life, you don't really know if what's happening is actually strange or if it's explainable in some way, and she might be, you know, just overreacting a tiny bit because it's a new place. So I was very excited about this one too, and the premise just sounded so weird. Like, is there something wrong with this land or not? And you don't know for a lot of the book. And I feel like you don't know for too much of the book. I just I wasn't impressed with where the plot went. The pacing was so slow through the entire book. I couldn't really connect with the main character. One of the big, just like not very important pet peeves I had about this book was that the daughter's name was Eleanor Queen. So the mother, like, over and over is calling her Eleanor Queen and like, Eleanor Queen, and I just don't ever want to hear that name again for some reason. It was so irritating. Was a huge disappointment. The cover's so gorgeous, and I really liked Zoje Stage's debut novel, Baby Teeth. That one was great, but Wonderland just was not for me. So those are my 4 picks for the books that disappointed me the most in 2020. Of course, I'm never saying don't read these books. If they sound interesting to you, definitely pick them up. People love all sorts of different books, so just because I don't like it doesn't mean you won't. And like, if one of these is one of your favorite books, sorry, just didn't fucking like them. Okay, now on a kind of more positive note, I would like to give you guys a couple of the books that surprised me the most in 2020. I don't think any of these were 2020 releases, right? I don't think. But they're books that I read in 2020 that kind of blew my mind in a way that I didn't think they would. And not all of them are like 4 or 5-star reads for me. Well, actually only one wasn't, I guess. But there were books that really kind of knocked my socks off. First one I'd like to talk about is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a young adult book. It's kind of like dystopian science fiction. It's really kind of a strange book, and the premise of this book is that mankind has found a way to kind of keep us alive longer than normal. They've defeated diseases, and they've defeated like dying from old age. So basically, like, people will live for a long time. And even if you're in an accident, they might be able to fix you. Like, if you jump off a building, they can make you come back to life. So since people aren't dying, they have to find a way to cull the population so that the earth doesn't become overpopulated. And that's where the Scythes come in. And these are these people who have been specially trained to reap people. They get to choose who gets to die. In this book, we're following two teenagers who are chosen to be the apprentices of a very well-known Scythe, and neither of them really want to do it because obviously, like, the civilian population doesn't have a great opinion of Scythes because, honestly, probably most deaths seem very random, and if we had people just like running around killing random people, like our family members and stuff, we probably wouldn't like them either. So that's the premise of this book. Really interesting. And I started reading this quite a few years ago. I think it was like 3 or 4 years when I had set it down and really had not even thought about it. I read like 50, 60, 70 pages, something like that, and put it down and was like, all right, that's it. But this year I decided to pick it up again, and I really, really liked it. This was a 4-star read for me, so not quite a 5-star, but there were so many things that I really, really enjoyed about this. There were a couple things where it's like, I didn't really see how it was necessary to the plot in any way. But overall, I really liked it. So next on my list is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This came out in 2019, and this is about, I've talked about this so many times on my channel, I think because I was so surprised with how good it was. But this is about a woman named Alex Stern, and she can see the dead. And because of this, she is recruited by Yale. Not because like she's an exceptionally good student. It's basically only because she's able to see the dead. So she's recruited because they have these secret societies in this school, and each one kind of deals with a little different type of magic. And Alex gets recruited to a house called the Leigh House, and they are basically, I don't know, they're just there to kind of keep the other houses in line, to make sure that people don't find out about the magic that they're using, and to make sure they're not harming people and things like that. I guess the reason this one surprised me was because I've read Leigh Bardugo's Shadow, what is it called? Grishaverse series, the Shadow and Bone ones, and then also I read Crooked Kingdom, which I did not like at all, even though so many people liked it. And then I didn't even, or Six of Crows, that was what it was called. Crooked Kingdom was the one I haven't read. That's like the second book in that duology. So I liked Grishaverse, okay, I guess. And I didn't have high hopes for this. Like, it sounded very spooky, and I wanted to read it, but I didn't think that I would like it as much as I did. It was very atmospheric. Going in, I will say it is a little bit hard at first because you're just this wave of information, and you're kind of like drowning in it a little bit. But if you can, wade your way through all that stuff, it ends up being such a rewarding read, and I really cannot wait for the second book. And like, I kind of have an aversion for a series, so to be so excited about the second book in a series, I think is, I don't know, maybe a little bit telling. So the next book I'd like to talk about is also in a series. Actually, 3 of the 4 books on this list are No, all 4 of them are. What am I saying? That's crazy. That's crazy. Huh. Who would have thought? But the next book I want to talk about is Godsgrave by Jay Kristoff. This is the 2nd book in a series, so I can't get into what the plot in this specific book is about, I guess. But in the 1st book, we're following a assassin in training named Mia Corveri. She is trying to become an assassin in training, basically. She's trying to get into this school to avenge her family. And she's something called a Darken, and she's able to use her shadow and, you know, like, control it and make herself invisible and things like that. It's very interesting. So in the 2nd book, we have a huge change of setting, and I really liked it. I don't want to give anything away, I guess, but Mia is not at the school in the 2nd book, and where she is just so interesting, and she kind of makes this like found family group of friends, which I really liked in this book especially. And I really think that this is the best one in the series. I was a little bit let down by the 3rd book. And why this one surprised me was that the 1st one was so hard to get into. It was like, it was worse than Ninth House. Like, I got 100 pages into, what's the 1st one called? Nevernight. And I almost put it down. I was like, I don't think I have time for this. And luckily, I kept going, and I ended up, you know, liking it pretty well, like a 4-star book. So I was expecting almost to not like Godsgrave, I guess. And I really liked it. I don't know. I was expecting maybe like a sophomore slump, or I don't know. I just wasn't really sure where Mia was gonna go after the 1st book, and I really liked where she ended up in the 2nd book. Okay, so last book that surprised me this year was The Passage by Justin Cronin. This is a big honker of a book. It's so thick. I had a little mass market paperback copy of it that I think was over 1,000 pages, but this one's like 700. It's still just a giant, magnificent book. But this is another really weird kind of genre-bending book where it's kind of horror, kind of science fiction, kind of really post-apocalyptic and apocalyptic. It's kind of hard to give you a synopsis because there are different parts of this book where we are at different timelines, kind of. And in the 1st part of this book, we're following a FBI agent. I think he's FBI, not CIA. I don't know. He's some sort of special agent. He is working for this kind of secret organization, and they are in this like bunker in the Colorado mountains. And he is trying to recruit criminals to come and have these experiments performed on them. And a lot of them do. You know, they're not really told exactly what's going to happen, but the stipulation is that if they go through this experiment, when the experiment's done, they can just go. But the experiment kind of is never done because the thing that they've given these people turned them into vampires, like giant, almost like giant vampire bats. It's very spooky. Yeah, that's like the very 1st part of this book, and it's just such a drastic change when you go from reading this, being so connected with the characters in this 1st part, and then it just stops. It's like you're going 90 miles an hour and you hit a bump in the road and like your car flies off the road and crashes, and like you kind of want to die because all of a sudden you're in this different place and at a different time and a completely new cast of characters in the 2nd part of the book. And the first time I read this, I set it down. I said, no. I was like, no fucking way. No, I was so invested in these characters, and now they're just gone. Like, fuck you, Justin Cronin. And I put this book down, and it's another one that just sat on my shelf for years and years and years, and I didn't think I was ever going to read it, quite honestly. I didn't think I was ever going to pick it up again. So the second part of the book is many years after the apocalypse, and you are following these characters that live in a tiny community. They've managed to stay alive while these vampire things just kind of roam freely around the country, and they don't know if there are people anywhere else, because if you're out at night, you're basically going to die. It's really interesting. I will say, after I got over being disconnected from the characters in the first part of the book, I actually grew to really love the characters in the second part of the book as well. So yeah, that's why it was a big surprise for me. I'm really glad that I picked this back up and finished it. And I actually did that with quite a few books. I think at least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, 4, no, actually 4 that I had put down and was like, not doing this right now. And then I picked them back up in 2020 and ended up finishing them and really liking them. Scythe and The Passage being, yeah, 2 of the most surprising for me. So I guess that's it. Kind of negative, kind of positive. Like I said, I'm never telling anyone not to read a book. Yeah, it's just, you know, that I didn't like some of these. They were kind of disappointments, but also there were quite a few surprises for me as well in 2020. And I'm looking forward to being more surprised by more books in 2021. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have a most disappointing or most surprising book that you read this year. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in another video soon. But until then, goodbye!